Hello class, this is Dr. Long. I hope this video finds you well. I'm shooting this short video to give you further insight on your Unit 3 essay. Now, as I hope you know by now, you are required to write an essay for Unit 3, and this is the only unit that you will need to write an essay for, and thus the only essay you will need to write in this class for the entire semester. And if you see any other essay requirements or folders on GoView, just ignore them. Unit 3 is the only one that you need to do. Now, for the purposes of the Unit 3 essay, and Unit 3 focuses on exploration, you will first need to read two primary sources. And to clarify, in history, a primary source is any source that originates in a historical event. So, for example, a letter or a diary entry from someone who was an eyewitness is a key primary source. That tells us about the event itself. It's much more credible than someone who wasn't there. And in this essay, you will need to read two primary sources that are accounts of voyages around the world in the 16th century. The first one is from the voyage led by Ferdinand Magellan of Spain, and the second one is led by an English explorer, Sir Francis Drake. And both of these men led voyages that ultimately went around the world. Now, these are exciting stories, and you need to keep in mind the historical circumstances in which they occurred. Now, this is a time of exploration, when the Europeans especially were exploring, with the Portuguese going around Africa and the Spanish beginning with Columbus going to the Americas, and then further voyages going around the world like these two and to Asia as well. So the knowledge about the world is opening up. This is a time of great discovery and interaction between various peoples. This is a time where educated people knew the earth was round, but keep in mind they don't entirely know what's on it yet. As they are on these voyages you read about, remember, and this is key, these were difficult and dangerous voyages because they did not have the kind of geographical knowledge we have. They couldn't just pull out a map and figure out where to go. They didn't have GPSs. A lot of this was unknown to them. They were figuring things out as they went. Also, remember, they did not have the modern technology we have. You'll be reading about men who were in sailing ships. Not ships with motors. They did not have the kind of logistics with regard to food that we have. They had to find some of that on their own. They didn't have the medicine we have, electricity, weaponry, and on and on. So it's a very different time. And just remember, these were adventures, although they were often, very dangerous, of course. Now, as you read these two documents, do take notes as you read. Whether that means taking notes on a separate sheet of paper or printing these documents out and underlining key passages and making notes in the margin, that will help you down the road as you begin to prepare for the essay, because you will need to cite your sources and use specific examples, and those notes or underlining in the margins will come in handy for that down the road. It'll save you time, actually. As you read, also, don't be surprised if you come across some unfamiliar language or unfamiliar terms. That's okay. Remember, you're reading an account of a sailing crew from the 16th century, and you may not be familiar with all the devices that they're using, or even some of the language you're using to describe people at the time that would have been familiar to them and would have made sense in their context, but maybe less so today. That's okay if you don't understand all that. Don't get lost in all the minor details. The big picture items that you should keep in mind and pay attention to as you read are things such as the plants and animals they come across as they travel, the different countries and the different geography and climates that they encounter as they move around. Also, especially the different peoples they come into contact with that are quite different from what they are accustomed to in Europe. Keep in mind their own cultural and religious background, and this is extremely important. Remember that this is a time where Europeans were predominantly Christian, of course. That was their cultural and religious background. The Spanish specifically were Catholic. The English had recently become Protestant because of the Reformation. This is a time of great religious fervor in Europe. And that will certainly influence and shape how they view and how they encounter other peoples. Now, after you have read and taken good notes and prepared to write this essay, you'll need to look very carefully at the Unit 3 guidelines, because it tells you exactly what you need to write about. The syllabus also has a section that is particularly useful in this. And as you'll see, you will have some freedom in what you write about. Obviously, you have to write about these voyages, 2 voyages of exploration, but there is some degree of latitude, degree of freedom on what you can write about with all of that. You need to use these 2 sources. In fact, you need to cite them as evidence. You can use some other outside sources if you choose to. It's not required. But you need to make your main focus these 2 primary sources. Some outside sources for background knowledge that may help you out to fill in some context as well as in your paper is fine. But do focus very extensively and heavily on these 2 primary sources, that from Magellan and Drake. And as you write, as you'll see from the guidelines, what you need to write about is comparing and contrasting the experiences of the English and the Spanish in these voyages. You will need a clear thesis statement, irregardless of how you choose to, what direction you choose to take your essay. And a thesis statement is an argument. It tells us what the whole point of your essay is. For example, you could argue that these 2 voyages show that the English and Spanish were very curious and were very open to learning about other parts of the world. You could, on the other hand, argue that that these 2 essays show that the 16th century was a time of conflict. As you'll see in here, the English and Spanish do not get along, both for political rivalry, reasons of political rivalry, and reasons of religious difference coming out of the Reformation. So there are a variety of arguments you could make, but you need a thesis statement that essentially will make an argument of some sort. Now, as you put your essay together as well, you may find it useful to write an outline before you write. An outline that details how you will address things with an introduction and a thesis statement, a main body in which you go through and address various topics using specific examples, and a conclusion in which you wrap things up and focus back on your thesis statement. In addition to organizing your paper well, and make sure you organize it in a way that is easy to follow for a reader. Don't jump around a lot in your essay. That makes it difficult to follow. But in addition to good organizing, make sure that your paper is generally free of spelling and grammatical errors. And the purpose of this is not to nitpick. The purpose is to make sure that you communicate clearly. If you don't communicate clearly, obviously your essay will lose points. And that's a key skill to work on no matter what field you go into. Clear communication will serve you very, very well. Now, in that regard, in terms of how to edit your paper, the syllabus has a section that discusses this at great length, so I refer you to that. But one tip I would like to give to you is to read your paper aloud before you turn it in. If you read it aloud, you will catch awkward sentences, you will catch grammatical and spelling errors, and then you can correct them before you turn in your final draft. And that will most certainly improve the overall quality of your essay. Now, last but not least, remember that you need to do your own work in this assignment. There is, as you turn this in, GoView does have a section where it will run your paper through Turnitin.com. And if plagiarism is detected, there are certainly consequences for that. You can review the syllabus for further guidelines on that. Certainly your own institution has policies against plagiarism as well. But this is taken very seriously. In short, if you do your own work, you won't have any problems in that regard. And that's to protect the integrity of your work and your grade. Well, I hope this video has been helpful to you. If you have questions or concerns as you're working on your essay, please let me know. Please email me on GoView, and I'll be happy to help you out. Otherwise, I hope you enjoy reading these two accounts of voyages around the world, and best of luck to you as you work on your papers. All right, well, I'll stop here. I'll talk to you later.